The watchwords start from the realization of the existence of ethical cultural issues. It is not permissible to deceive those who see the restored work. A contemporaneity has only knows the testimonies of the past, it does not possess them. It has the obligation to hand them down as unaltered as possible, possibly enriched with the meanings of its time. It must improve them, renouncing to obscure them with its own sign, and the restoration project must translate those indications in the best possible way through practical action. This is a complex operation which can almost never be said to be completely successful, in which the architect restorer is continually called upon to make critical choices which, from time to time, shift the axis of the issue. What matters is that in the end the result is as close as possible to what was set out in the premise. The issue underlying the watchwords listed above is thus that of balancing sometimes opposing necessities. It is almost always a matter of putting the criteria together, of relating the issue underlying each of them, which sometimes seem to present themselves as openly contradictory, if not producing absolutely unsolvable aporias, but which only by virtue of the coherence of the project, of designer's ability to hold things together, can be overcome and resolved. The underlying question is, can interventions be made that are compatible and recognizable at the same time? Can intervention of the highest possible durability be carried out while remaining reversible? Can intervention that tend toward minimal intervention be carried out while ensuring compatibility, recognizability, and durability? Protective intervention generally take the form of coverings to defend heritage testimony from climate aggressions. Such protection can be made in various ways, but they must be compatible, at least aesthetically, with what they protect. Such compatibility might aim to counteract the image of the monument or instead accompany it. In this case, the designer sought a different way to protect, creating a structure that at the same time declares itself as different from the protected building but tries to evoke its form. Aesthetic compatibility must also concern interventions that repair deficiencies that have occurred over time. In this case, and the one that follows, the intervention tries to approach the authentic part with care not to overpower it in shape, color, and fixture, the authentic part. Care should always be taken when supplementing the architecture with parts that provide new services, such as an elevator or walkway. Such additions should not only be aesthetically pleasing and compatible, but should also serve to ensure as many functions as possible, such as electrical systems, lighting, security systems, etc. In reconstruction surgeries, care should be taken that what is reconstructed cannot be confused with what is authentic, but as in the present cases, it does not always appear easy to achieve this. Compatibility, in this sense, means the added materials must mate with the original materials without causing mechanical damage, except graphia, by different thermal expansion or different elastic modules, or chemical damage, i.e., by formation of soluble salts or other hazardous products, or physical damage, i.e., by different porosity and permeability. So, about compatibility in relation to consolidation and using organic resins. This type of product carries out its action through high adhesive power, capable of welding together the decohesive granules of the stone material. In most cases, organic consolidants are also endowed with water repellent and therefore protective properties towards the treated surface. All such products are synthetic polymers. An initial classification of synthetic organic polymers, commonly called synthetic resins or plastics, can be made on the basis of the structure of their molecules, which can be linear or three-dimensional lattice. Organic substances used for consolidation purposes on the stone materials can belong to two distinct classes. Thermoplastic resins, they present a linear structure that guarantees them flexibility and solubility in appropriate solvents, which guarantees a partial reversibility of the consolidation intervention in the face, however, of reduced adhesive power. Thermosetting resins, these are polymers with a cross-linked structure that gives them good adhesive power, but poor flexibility and reduced mechanical properties. A common feature of all inorganic consolidants is the formation of insoluble precipitates within the treated stone material. The choice of the specific product to be used must be made in relation to the type of stone material on which intervention is needed. Inorganic chemistry products have a remarkable affinity with stone materials in terms of their lattice structure and physical characteristics. They are also characterized by a generally longer service life than organic substances. Application involves the precipitation within the capillaries of the stone material of a new, poorly soluble compound as a result of the reaction of the consolidant with the same of the components of the stone material itself, with carbon dioxide or with water. This compound adheres to the walls of the vacuoles and capillaries, reducing their voids. The use of materials other than those of authentic part has always been practiced. What is now clear is that compatibility must be the central factor in choosing them. It is therefore necessary to employ materials whose physical, mechanical, and chemical characteristics do not endanger the life of the authentic materials. In general terms, the use of materials similar to the original ones should be a guarantee of at least equivalent durability. But in the history of the discipline, sometimes very different strategies have been employed. The use of different materials can be an asset. Here you see the use of titanium stainless sheets, as long as you know how to prevent risks. See rust from windows frames in the second case. When different structural solutions are employed, care must be taken to ensure that there is no risk to either the parts that are to be consolidated or the parts that are being replaced. In the third case, the use of material, the Carrara marble slabs, that are unstable at local temperatures, this is Helsinki, has caused them to deform, making the existence precarious. One aspect that should be given great consideration is the effects that the durability of the material introduced during the restoration intervention can have or has on the material substrate. Especially in the past, this aspect has been little considered, with often catastrophic outcomes for its preservation. A typical example is the use of cement-based mortars for the stitching welding of antichi brick or thick lithic elements. Private time durability is understood to be that associated with the use of materials with predictable decay, to be reapplied at predetermined intervals. Such are synthetic resins, the durability of which might vary depending on the method of application, the substrate to which they are applied, and the physical and chemical agents affecting them. Minimum intervention means first and foremost continuous and incessant maintenance intervention, designed to safeguard the factory through that plethora of small operations useful to prevent rather than cure the damage. Outside this meaning, minimum intervention does not mean small intervention, but intervention that is as focused as possible on solving the issue related to the preservation of architecture by employing all resources, material, technical, technological, and methodological, useful for achieving the purpose. Nor should it mean minimalist intervention, understood as an aesthetic attitude, although, as far as the introduction of the new is concerned, minimal intervention is to be understood, in my view, as the minimum intervention necessary to nevertheless ensure the necessary quality of the pre-existing additional wall. And thus, the focus must be on the need to produce quality in the new that fits, franks, approaches, overlaps the old, preserving it as much as possible. To ensure the preservation of an architecture, careful maintenance must first be implemented. Reading gutters of leaves is a minimal intervention, but one that can greatly contribute to the preservation of an architecture. Reversibility, as a word in the field of restoration, has become widespread in recent times, in the 1970s, along with other guiding criteria of the conservation project: compatibility, minimal intervention. Important in this regard have been the nefarious results of interventions seen after time: use of reinforced concrete, protective consolidants, speed of plant obsolescence, and wrong uses. Hence, the realization that any action, even non-action, one goes to perform on the artifact has consequences that by the reversibility of time are also irreversible. Reversibility today is understood as the possibility of backwards control of design sequences with varying degrees of reversibility by analyzing from the perspective of technological and material choices the various aspects of design. For example, the choice of appropriate space and pathway design that can allow reversibility of use, the choice of the type of facilities and their placement with a view to their rapid overcoming. Essential purpose of restoration is not only to ensure the subsistence of the work in the present, but also to ensure its transmission into the future. And since no one can ever be certain that the work will not need other intervention, even simply conservative ones, in the future, it's necessary to facilitate and not preclude any subsequent interventions. Any operation, even the most seemingly insignificant, such as a cleaning, must take reversibility into account, even with the consciousness that removing the spot is an operation that has only positive repercussions. Even the simple action of cleaning must be done with the implicit goal of allowing the dirt to rest, or at least that this can happen at least potentially. The question of reversibility seems to resolve itself into an aporia when it comes to plasters. Yet, between an intervention aimed at repairing the gaps, trying to minimize the destruction of the original materials, and one that proceeds, first of all, to total deplastering before applying a new plaster, it is clear that there is a huge gap about reversibility. The removal of the existing plaster can never be a reversible intervention. Protective interventions, already discussed under compatibility, should always be thought of from a reversibility perspective. What is sometimes not considered is that during their permanence, some interventions can have detrimental effects on pre-existing structure, as in the case of the plexus roofing of the Greek theatre in Heraclea Minoa. In other cases, if reversibility is assured by the possibility of dismantling truly impactful structures, there remains again the problem of aesthetic compatibility, which has already been mentioned. In reconstruction operations, reversibility is often charged by the need to intersperse new built pieces with the original parts. As an overall goal, the designer must work in a low removal of the added parts without damaging the pre-existing parts. Is reversibility measurable? It's a very complicated issue, but related to the use of new materials, consolidants, protected, it could be possible to measure. For instance, amount of protectant consolidant extracted via appropriate solvent relative to the amount of protectant consolidant used, or 2. Checking the inhibition of a material before treatment, after treatment, and after extraction of the protective material. What future for reversibility? Focus on retractability and their restoration. Second, search for materials that as they decay becomes active substrate, fuel interventions. Third, products that as they decay are more easily removed or solubilized. 4. Products that sublimate at very low rate. These are the future of reversibility in consolidation. In relation to the reversibility of consolidation interventions, when even it would be possible to proceed with the disassembly of the elements added to the consolidate, it should be considered that, in any case, the effects of the consolidation interventions will never again be removable. The lack of curvature of a beam, the way it will behave on the underlying wall will exert their action permanently, never again being able to be brought back. Recognizability, unlike most other criteria, is an ideological requirement and is not related to the physical chemical material aspects of the intervention. A restoration can ensure the persistence of a monument whether it is analog, imitative, or recognizable. Morally, ethically, and architecturally, however, this fact cannot make the designer's consideration of the issue, on the contrary, any less relevant. There are at least two major issues that immediately arise regarding the question of recognizability. Ethical question. One must not deceive the relative, etc. Aesthetic question. The addition must be recognizable but must not alter the formal, chromatic, expressive balance of the ancient work. Rather, it must approach it, even if the use of materials that, without becoming aesthetically incompatible, nevertheless allow for clear recognition of the parts where the construction has been integrated, modified, reconstructed clearly depends on the designer's abilities, both in knowing how properly processed materials can achieve that purpose. Such sensitivity is also essential when the restoration work involves very delicate construction details, such as those in this photo. Finally, there is the chapter on modern style addition. In this case, as in the previous ones, whether they are architectural addition or technological addition, as in the case of a slide, the ability to produce additions that are recognizable but fit in with the pre-existing situation depends totally on the design's accessibility and technical ability.